Hello everyone. I hope you are all doing well. 18 chapters, 700 verses. One conversation that has outlasted empires, survived invasions, and quietly reshaped the minds of scientists, generals, poets, and CEOs across 3,000 years of human history. Kurukshetra, a vast, dusty plain in what is now the state of Haryana in northern India. And on this field, two armies have assembled, numbering in the millions, bristling with war elephants, war chariots, conch shells, and the kind of silence that only exists in the moment before everything changes forever. The year is approximately 3102 BCE according to traditional Vedic reckoning, and a war is about to begin that will determine the fate of an entire civilization, the Great Kurukshetra War, the climax of the epic Mahabharata, a conflict so vast and so layered that scholars have called it the world's longest and most complex narrative ever committed to human memory. At the center of it all, standing in a chariot between the two armies, is a man in crisis, Arjuna, the world's greatest archer, a warrior of almost supernatural skill, a man who has trained his entire life for this exact moment, and he is falling apart. His bow, the legendary Gandiva, slips from his fingers. His palms sweat, his mouth dries, his knees buckle beneath him, and Arjuna, the undefeatable, the pride of the Pandava brothers, collapses onto the floor of his chariot and tells his charioteer that he simply cannot fight, because standing in the opposing army, wearing armor, carrying weapons ready to kill him, are his grandfather Bhishma, his teacher Dronacharya, his cousins, his uncles, men who fed him, trained him, loved him, and Arjuna looks at them and asks the question that every human being has asked at the edge of an impossible decision. What is the point of winning if I destroy everything I love to do it? His charioteer watches this collapse in silence. And here is where the Bhagavad Gita begins its first and most important reveal, because that charioteer is not merely a charioteer. That calm, dark-skinned, lotus-eyed figure holding the reins is Krishna, the supreme being, God incarnate, who has chosen to drive Arjuna's chariot not as a warrior but as a witness, a guide, and, in this moment, the greatest life coach in recorded history. Krishna does not immediately offer comfort. He does not rush to reassure Arjuna or promise that everything will be fine. Instead, he does something far more interesting. He lets Arjuna speak, lets him voice every fear, every doubt, every philosophical objection. Because the Gita teaches us from its very first breath that a question fully asked is already halfway answered. This is Chapter 1, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's grief. And before you dismiss grief as weakness, understand what the Gita is actually doing here. It is telling you that the spiritual journey does not begin in a temple or a meditation retreat. It begins the moment you are standing between two impossible choices and your hands start shaking. Welcome to the Corporate Gita, because whether you are standing on Kurukshetra or sitting in a boardroom, staring at a resignation letter, or lying awake at 3 in the morning wondering if you chose the right life, Arjuna's breakdown is your breakdown, and Krishna's answer, given 5,000 years ago on a battlefield at dawn, is still waiting for you. Arjuna does not collapse because he is weak. He collapses because he is human, and that distinction is everything. He looks across the field of Kurukshetra and sees not enemies but faces he knows: Bhishma, his grandsire, the man who taught him to hold a bow; Drona, his guru, the man who shaped his hands into weapons. In that moment, the warrior becomes a son, a student, a nephew, and the weight of love nearly buries him alive. This is the first teaching of the Gita, and Krishna has not even spoken yet. The battlefield is the classroom, and the lesson is this: crisis does not reveal who you are, it reveals who you forgot you were. Every meeting where your voice has gone quiet, every email you drafted and deleted, every time you smiled and said, "I'm fine," that is your Kurukshetra. Arjuna does something that most leaders never do. He speaks his fear out loud. He tells Krishna his body is trembling. His bow is slipping from his fingers. His mind is burning. In corporate language, he files a full, honest report on his own breakdown, and that radical honesty is what makes him ready to receive wisdom. The Sanskrit word used for Arjuna's state in this chapter is vishada, which translates as grief, despondency, or deep anguish, and the Gita does not call it a problem to be solved quickly. It calls it a yoga, a path, which means the ancient sages understood something modern productivity culture still refuses to admit: that sitting inside your suffering long enough to understand it is itself a form of discipline. Look at what Arjuna is actually afraid of, not death but consequence. He is afraid that if he acts, everything he loves will be destroyed, and if he does not act, the same outcome waits for him anyway. That is the trap that freezes so many of us. Not the unknown, but the terrible clarity of two roads, both of which lead somewhere painful. Krishna listens. This is easily missed because we rush toward his answers, but the Lord of the universe, charioteer on the field of Dharma, sits in silence and lets Arjuna pour out every doubt, every argument, every piece of philosophical reasoning that Arjuna uses to justify his paralysis. That silence is a teaching in itself. Wisdom does not interrupt grief, it waits for it to finish speaking. By the time chapter 1 closes, Arjuna has laid down his bow, the Gandiva, one of the most powerful weapons in all creation, and sat down in the middle of the chariot, in the middle of the war. The word the text uses is upavisha, meaning he simply sat down. Not retreated, not fled, sat down. And that posture, that surrender of control in the middle of chaos, is the exact moment the Gita begins its real work. If you have ever sat at your desk and stared at your screen and done absolutely nothing, not because you were lazy, but because every direction felt wrong, then you have lived this verse. Arjuna's sitting down is not failure. It is the last honest thing a person does before they stop pretending they have all the answers. It is the cracking open of the shell that was keeping the light out. Chapter 1 ends and chapter 2 is about to begin, and what arrives next is not comfort. It is confrontation. Krishna looks at Arjuna, the greatest archer of his age, a man trained from birth for exactly this moment, and says, in essence, where did this weakness come from, and what are you doing bringing it to a sacred field? He does not cradle the grief. He challenges it. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing a teacher can do is refuse to let you stay small. This is the pivot the entire Gita turns on. The moment a student's breakdown becomes a teacher's opening. 5,000 years later, that same opening appears every time you admit, out loud or in the silence of your own mind, that you do not know what to do next. Krishna is not a figure locked in a chariot at Kurukshetra. He is the clarity that rises in you the moment you stop performing confidence and start asking honest questions. And chapter 2 is where he begins to answer them. Krishna opens chapter 2 not with poetry but with provocation. He calls Arjuna's grief an aryajuam, unworthy of a noble soul, a disgrace that will close the doors of heaven and open the mouths of enemies. It is startling, even uncomfortable, the first time you read it. But Krishna is not being cruel. He is being precise, diagnosing a collapse that has dressed itself up as compassion. Arjuna responds with something every thinking person will recognize. He builds a case. He lists reasons, precedents, philosophical objections. He talks about family lineage, about the breaking of Kuladharma, about widows and chaos and the corruption of ancient order. He is not being dishonest. He genuinely believes every word, but Krishna sees what Arjuna cannot yet see. That a brilliant mind in the grip of fear will always find brilliant reasons to stand still. Then Krishna shifts the entire conversation onto a different plane entirely, and here is where the Gita stops being a war story and becomes something far larger. He speaks of the Atman, the self that was never born and will never die, and the words he uses have echoed across 5,000 years like a struck bell that refuses to stop ringing. Naina Chindanti Astri, weapons cannot cut it, fire cannot burn it, water cannot wet it, wind cannot dry it. This teaching, Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, is Krishna's first and foundational answer to Arjuna's crisis, and it reframes the entire question. You are not your body, not your role, not your reputation, not your fear. You are the awareness behind all of it, the witness that watches the storm without becoming the storm. The grief that floored Arjuna, the anxiety that floors you before a boardroom presentation or a life-altering decision, is real, but it is not you. Now apply this to the modern battlefield, and you will see why it matters so urgently. When a company restructures and your identity collapses with your job title, when a relationship ends and you feel you have lost yourself, when a diagnosis arrives and the future you planned dissolves overnight, that devastation is the body's experience, the ego's experience. Krishna is pointing insistently to something in you that none of those events can actually reach. But Krishna is careful not to let this become an excuse for inaction, and this is the masterstroke of chapter 2. He does not say, because the self is eternal, nothing matters. He He says, because the self is eternal, act. Act freely, act fully, act without the paralysis that comes from clinging to outcomes you cannot control. The philosophy of the Atman is not a doorway out of responsibility. It is the ground that makes true responsibility possible. Here Krishna introduces what will become the Gita's most radical and enduring idea, nishkama karma, desireless action, the discipline of doing your duty without attachment to reward or result. Karme evidhikaras ti ma felu katakana. Your right is to the action alone, never to its fruits. Read that slowly because it overturns almost everything the modern world tells you about motivation, ambition, and success. The world says, define your goal, attach your identity to it, measure your worth by whether you achieve it, and this formula produces driven people who are also chronically anxious because every outcome is outside their control and they have bet their sense of self on it. Krishna's formula says something quieter and far more durable. Bring full presence and full effort to this moment, this task, this duty, and release the scoreboard to the universe. Not because results don't matter, but because your peace cannot depend on them. Chapter 2 also gives us one of the Gita's most memorable portraits, the Sthitaprajna, the person of steady wisdom, the one whose mind is not blown by pleasure or crushed by pain, who withdraws the senses from their objects like a tortoise drawing in its limbs, who moves through the world without being swept away by it. Krishna paints this figure not as a hermit escaped to a mountain but as someone who remains fully engaged, and that distinction is everything. The chapter closes with a vision of the person who has understood all of this, free from craving, free from fear, free from the compulsive need for approval, moving through life like a lamp in a windless place, its flame perfectly still. It is not a picture of someone who feels nothing. It is a picture of someone who feels everything and is undefeated by it. And the quiet, astonishing promise at the heart of Chapter 2 is this: that ground is available to you. Not after enlightenment, not after retirement, but in the middle of the battle, exactly where you are standing right now. We move now into Chapter 3, and Krishna does something unexpected. He doubles down. Arjuna, who has just received this extraordinary teaching about the eternal self and the stillness of the wise, asks the most logical question in the world. If knowledge is so superior to action, why are you telling me to fight? It is a fair question, and it exposes a misunderstanding that trips people up even today. The idea that once you understand something deeply, you should simply stop doing things, retreat, let the world run itself. But Krishna's answer cuts through that with surgical precision. There is no such thing as standing still. Krishna says it plainly, not for a single moment does a human being exist without acting. Even the decision to do nothing is an action. The body breathes, the mind moves, energy flows. Existence itself is activity, and pretending otherwise is not wisdom. It is self-deception dressed up as philosophy. This is where Krishna introduces one of the Gita's most foundational and least comfortable ideas, the concept of yajna, or sacrifice, which here means something far broader than ritual offerings. Every action you perform, he says, can either feed the cycle of the world or feed only your own hunger, and the difference between those two determines the quality of your life entirely. Think of the person in your office who does their work purely to extract recognition, salary, leverage, status, versus the person who does their work as an offering, as a contribution to something larger than their own resume. Krishna is not being romantic here, he is being structural. One approach binds you tighter and tighter to outcomes. The other sets you free while you work. And then comes the concept that the corporate world has perhaps most desperately needed to hear for centuries: nishkama karma, action without personal craving for results. This is not passivity, it is not indifference, it is not low ambition. It is the discipline of throwing yourself completely into what you do while releasing your white-knuckled grip on what comes back. Arjuna pushes back again. He wants to know what actually forces a person to act against their own better judgment, to do things they know are harmful, to self-sabotage and overreach and repeat the same destructive patterns even when they understand exactly what they are doing. Krishna's answer is devastating in its accuracy. It is desire and anger, born of the quality of rajas, the restless, grasping energy that clouds the intellect like smoke covers fire. Krishna uses three stunning images here. Desire is like fire covered by smoke, like a mirror coated with dust, like a child wrapped inside a womb. In each case, something clear and good is obscured by something that clings. And the battleground where desire wages its first war is not the marketplace or the boardroom. It is the senses, then the mind, then the intellect, working inward layer by layer until your clearest knowing is buried. The prescription Krishna gives is not suppression but mastery, to know where the enemy operates, to strengthen the higher faculties, and to act from that place rather than from the reactive, grasping place of the unexamined self. This is not about becoming cold or detached from life's richness. It is about becoming so deeply rooted that the storms of desire and fear move through you without tearing you from your foundation. Chapter 3 ends with a challenge that echoes across every boardroom, every difficult conversation, every moment you are tempted to cut corners or chase a shortcut. Krishna says, even great souls act according to their nature, and the world follows the example set by those who lead. The question is not whether you will influence the people around you. The question is what kind of influence you will be, and whether you are awake enough to choose it. We move now into the heart of the Gita's philosophical architecture. Chapter 4, where Krishna does something utterly unexpected on that dust-covered field of Kurukshetra. He reveals that he has taught this very wisdom before, not once, but across ages, to Vivasvan the sun god, who passed it to Manu, who passed it to Ikshvaku, the ancestor of kings. Arjuna stops. He is confused, almost incredulous, because Krishna stands before him as a mortal man, a charioteer, a friend, and yet speaks of teaching lessons at the dawn of civilization, before either of them was born into this particular body, this particular war. Krishna answers that confusion with one of the most electrifying declarations in all of sacred literature. Whenever righteousness declines and chaos rises, he manifests, not as a metaphor, not as a symbol, but as a living presence entering the world to restore what has been lost, to protect what is still sacred, and to remind humanity of its own deeper nature. Bring this into your own life for a moment. Think of the times when your inner compass was overwhelmed by noise, when the culture around you normalized shortcuts, cynicism, or fear, and something quiet inside you pushed back. That push, according to Krishna, is not accidental. It is the same restoring intelligence that has moved through human history since its very beginning. Chapter 4 then pivots to one of the most misunderstood teachings in the entire Gita, the doctrine of action in inaction and inaction in action. And before your mind files this away as mystical poetry with no practical use, consider what Krishna is actually pointing at, the difference between compulsive doing and conscious doing, between reacting and responding. The person who is enslaved to outcomes is always in motion but never truly acting. They are being acted upon by fear, by craving, by the relentless machinery of ego, while the person who has surrendered the fruit of their work moves with total engagement, total effort, and yet carries no psychological weight from the result, because they have placed the result back in the hands of something larger than their own preferences. Krishna introduces the concept of yajna, sacred offering, and reframes the entire idea of work. Every profession, every skill, every act of honest service becomes a form of worship when it is performed without the poison of selfish attachment. When the accountant, the surgeon, the engineer, the teacher, the leader all bring their full self to the altar of their craft and release the outcome with open hands. He lists different forms of yajna in this chapter: the offering of wealth, the offering of austerity, the offering of knowledge, the offering of breath itself in the practice of pranayama. And the point is not to rank these hierarchically but to illuminate that every sincere path of discipline, when pursued without ego as the engine, becomes a doorway to the same liberated consciousness. And then Krishna delivers what many scholars consider the single most important verse of chapter 4, that knowledge, true knowledge, is the greatest purifier, greater even than the most rigorous physical austerity, because a person who has understood the nature of the self and the nature of action is no longer capable of being enslaved by the results of what they do. They move through the world like a flame that burns without clinging to the wood. The chapter closes with an urgency that cuts through centuries and lands directly in your present moment. Krishna tells Arjuna to rise, to cut the doubt from his heart with the sword of knowledge, and to act. Not someday, not after every question is answered, not when he feels fully ready, but now, because the battlefield is already here, and hesitation dressed as contemplation is still hesitation. And so we arrive at chapter 5. A chapter that, on the surface, appears to present a contradiction, one of those moments where you lean forward in your chair and say, "Wait, Krishna, which is it?" Because Arjuna, still reeling, asks the question that must have been burning in him since the very beginning. If knowledge and renunciation are so powerful, why are you still telling me to fight? Krishna smiles at the confusion, and his answer is one of the most quietly revolutionary things ever spoken. He says both paths lead to the same destination, but karma yoga, the path of action done without attachment, is superior for most people because it does not require you to abandon the world, only to abandon your grip on the results of what you do within it. Think about what that means in your own life. You do not need to quit your career, leave your family, or retreat to a cave in the Himalayas to find liberation. What you need is a different relationship with what you're already doing. A shift so subtle it's almost invisible from the outside, but so total it rewires everything from the inside. Krishna introduces a concept here that stops most readers in their tracks. He says the wise person, the one established in this knowledge, sees an action in action and action in inaction. Meaning the true renunciate is not the one who does nothing but the one who does everything without the ego claiming ownership of any of it, performing every act as an offering, as service, as pure function without the weight of personal ambition driving the wheel. He describes this liberated person, the sthitaprajna, the one of steady wisdom, and the portrait is almost unervingly calm. They are not elated by pleasure, not shattered by pain, free from attachment, fear, and anger, steady as a lamp in a windless room. And this is not a description of someone who feels nothing but of someone who is no longer controlled by what they feel. He describes the senses as the great enemies of this peace, the turbulent rivers of sight, sound, taste, touch, and thought that pull the mind outward 1,000 times a day. And he tells Arjuna that the one who can withdraw these senses inward before death, like a tortoise pulling its limbs into its shell, has mastered the fundamental art that no business school, no productivity system, and no self-help framework has ever been able to fully teach. And then Krishna says something that feels almost like a secret whispered between friends on a battlefield where no one else can hear. He says the truly renounced person works not for themselves but for the good of all beings, and in doing so, paradoxically, becomes the most effective force in the world, because they are no longer leaking energy into anxiety, ego defense, or the exhausting theater of impression management. Chapter 5 closes with a vision of the sage who has found the inner light, who rejoices only in the self, who is illuminated from within rather than lit up by external approval or achievement. And Krishna calls this Brahmanirvana, the peace of Brahman, available not after death, not after retirement, not after the children have grown and the mortgage is paid, but right here in this body, in this life, beginning now. We are entering chapter 6, and the battlefield shifts inward in a way that will unsettle you, challenge you, and if you stay with it, liberate you, because Krishna is about to take everything he has said about action and knowledge and renunciation and show Arjuna, and through Arjuna every one of us, exactly what it costs to actually live it. Not in theory, not in scripture, but in the raw, daily, often failing practice of learning to control the most powerful and most dangerous thing you will ever encounter, your own mind. Chapter 6 opens not with thunder, not with a cosmic vision, but with something almost shockingly ordinary, Krishna redefining what a renunciant actually is. And the answer is not the cave-dwelling ascetic you imagined, not the monk who has abandoned fire and ritual, but the person who does what must be done without clinging to the reward of doing it. Arjuna has heard about karma yoga, about jnana yoga, about the sage who has found inner stillness, but Krishna now turns to the actual technology of transformation, the practice that makes all of it possible, and he calls it dhyana yoga, the yoga of meditation, which in the corporate age we might call the daily discipline of returning to yourself before the world gets to you first. Krishna is precise here in a way that should arrest every ambitious person listening. He says the mind is the cause of both bondage and liberation, that for the person who has mastered the mind it is a friend, and for the person who has not it is the cruelest enemy, working against you from the inside in ways no competitor, no difficult manager, no market crash ever could. And here is what makes this practical rather than philosophical. Krishna does not say suppress the mind. He does not say silence it through force of will. He says train it gradually, steadily, the way you train a muscle or a skill, through repeated return, through what he calls abhyasa and vairagya, practice and dispassion, the twin engines of every genuine inner transformation. The instructions Krishna gives for meditation in this chapter are remarkably specific. Find a firm seat, neither too high nor too low, in a clean and quiet place. Sit with spine erect, eyes drawn inward to the point between the brows, and direct the entire flood of mental energy, which is usually scattered across 100 anxieties and ambitions, toward a single point of stillness. This is the ancient protocol, and it works. Krishna describes the ideal yogi in terms that should genuinely discomfort the high achiever. Not craving more than is needed, sleeping neither too much nor too little, eating neither too much nor too little, equally at ease in honor and dishonor, in heat and cold, in praise and blame. A portrait of someone who has stopped being yanked around by the poles of pleasure and pain that most of us call a normal life. Then Arjuna does something remarkable. He interrupts with a question so honest, so human, so recognizable that it has been echoing in meditation halls and corporate offices for 5,000 years. He says, Krishna, the mind is restless, turbulent, powerful, stubborn, and I think it is easier to control the wind than to control this thing. So what happens to the person who tries and fails, who begins sincerely and falls away? Are they lost? Krishna's answer to Arjuna's fear of failure is one of the most compassionate passages in all of the Gita. He says no sincere effort is ever wasted, no step taken toward the divine is ever erased, that a person who strives and stumbles is reborn into a family of the wise or the spiritually pure, carrying forward the impressions of practice across lifetimes, as though the soul remembers what the mind forgets. The chapter closes with Krishna making a declaration that lands like a quiet thunderclap. He says the yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the man of knowledge, greater than the man of ritual action, and of all yogis, the one who worships with faith and with the inner self absorbed in Krishna is the most deeply united, the most intimate, not the most flawless, not the most disciplined, but the most devoted and the most sincere. What chapter 6 gives us is not a meditation manual for monks. It is a mirror held up to anyone who has ever sat with their own mind and been overwhelmed by it, who has tried to be calm under pressure and failed, who has started a practice and abandoned it, who has wondered whether the inner work is even worth it. And Krishna's answer across every verse of this chapter is the same. Yes, it is worth it, begin again. And the beginning again is itself the practice. We move now into chapter 7, and if chapter 6 was the inner landscape, chapter 7 is the cosmic map, the moment Krishna steps back and says, let me show you not just how to live, but what reality actually is, what I am, what the world is made of, and why you keep mistaking the shadow for the substance. Krishna opens with a staggering promise. He tells Arjuna that by knowing him fully, there will be nothing left in this world left to know. And he says this not as a boast but as an orientation, the way a master navigator doesn't just hand you a compass but shows you the nature of the ocean itself before you set sail. He introduces the concept of his two natures, para-prakriti and apara-prakriti, the lower and the higher, and this is one of the most quietly revolutionary teachings in the entire Gita, because Krishna is saying the material world, the one you trade in, the one you fight for, the one you fear losing, is his lower nature, not the peak of reality but the base of it. The 8 elements of the lower nature, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intellect, ego. These are the building blocks of everything you can touch, measure, and price, and Krishna lists them almost casually, the way an architect mentions load-bearing walls before pointing upward to say, but the design itself, that is something else entirely. The higher nature is the living principle, the consciousness that animates all of this, and Krishna says it is by this higher nature that the whole universe is sustained. The way electricity running through a building is invisible to anyone admiring the lights, and yet without it, the lights mean nothing. Then comes the verse that stops you cold. Krishna says he is the taste in water, the light in the sun and the moon, the sacred syllable Om in the Vedas, the sound in space, the humanity in human beings. He is not describing himself as separate from creation but as the very quality that makes each thing what it is, the essential note inside every note. This is where the Corporate Gita speaks directly to anyone who has ever chased something, a title, a number, an outcome, and felt the hollowness once they reached it, because Krishna is diagnosing that hollowness here, saying you were tasting me in the pursuit and mistaking me for the prize, and when the prize arrived without me, it rang empty. He then describes the 4 kinds of people who turn toward him, the distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the man of wisdom, and he speaks of all 4 with warmth, but says the wise one, the one who has no other desire, who sees Krishna in everything and everything in Krishna, that one is extraordinarily dear to him, rare as a jewel, rare as a clear sky at midnight. Krishna turns then to Maya, his divine illusion, and he says it is almost impossible to cross this veil of the 3 qualities, the gunas that color all of perception, but that those who take refuge in him alone can cross beyond it, and this is not escapism, it is the most practical instruction he has given, because the crossing is not a departure from the world but a shift in how you see it while standing fully inside it. The chapter ends with Krishna pointing toward what he calls the Brahman, the ultimate ground of being, the knowledge beyond which there is nothing further to know, and he tells Arjuna that those who know this, who understand what he is at the root of all things, they are the ones who come to him at the hour of death not in fear but in recognition, the way you return home not to a stranger's house but to the place that was always yours. And so we arrive at chapter 8, the chapter Krishna calls Aksara Brahma Yoga, the yoga of the imperishable absolute, and Arjuna, whose mind is restless the way a lamp flame is restless in wind, asks the question that every thinking person eventually asks, what happens at the moment of death, and does it matter what we are thinking when we go? Krishna's answer is startling in its precision. He says that whatever state of being one remembers at the final moment, that is exactly what one attains, because the mind at death is not a blank slate but the accumulated signature of every choice, every thought, every pattern you have reinforced across a lifetime, and this is not theology. This is cognitive science spoken in Sanskrit 4,000 years before the laboratory existed. He uses a word here, bhava, which means the deep inner disposition, the emotional and mental climate of a person, and he is saying that your bhava at death is not a coincidence but a consequence, the way the last note of a symphony is inevitable given everything that came before it, and this should make every ambitious, distracted, deadline-chasing professional pause and ask what their bhava actually is right now. Then Krishna says something that reshapes the entire framework. He says, remember me, think of me, fight, and with your mind and intellect fixed on me you shall come to me without doubt. And this is not a request for passive devotion but for active integrated consciousness, the kind where your work and your awareness of the sacred are not two separate rooms in your life but the same room seen in full light. He describes the Aum, the primordial sound, the single syllable that contains all of existence, and he tells Arjuna that the one who departs the body while holding this sound, while holding the awareness of the Brahman, reaches the highest goal, and this is why the great sages treated every breath as a practice, because they understood that the last breath is simply one more breath in a long, unbroken chain of intention. Krishna then opens a door into something cosmological. He speaks of two paths, the bright path of the sun and the dark path of the moon, the northern and southern passages, and he says those who depart on the bright path of knowledge do not return to rebirth, while those who depart on the dark path cycle back. And he is not describing geography but the quality of consciousness, the difference between the one who lives awake and the one who lives absorbed in the surface of things. There is a detail here that is easy to miss but impossible to unhear. Krishna says that even those who perform great rituals, great sacrifices, great acts of charity, if they do it with desire for reward, they enjoy the fruits of those acts in the higher realms and then return. And this is the Gita's most uncomfortable teaching for the achievement-obsessed, because it means that doing good things for recognition is still a kind of golden cage, a beautiful prison that you have built yourself. He then returns to the imperishable, the aksara, the unmanifest beyond the manifest, and describes it as the supreme goal toward which the yogis who have renounced all desires move daily, the place that cannot be reached by weapons or burned by fire or affected by the drama playing out on the field of Kurukshetra. And this is the anchor that Arjuna needs, the understanding that beneath the noise of battle there is a silence that has never once been disturbed. Krishna closes this chapter by calling it the most secret of all knowledge. Not secret because it is hidden but secret because it can only be truly received by the one who is ready to receive it. And he says that understanding it, truly living from it, liberates a person from the smallest sorrow. And he means the sorrow that is not situational but existential, the low hum of anxiety that lives beneath every success and makes even good days feel insufficient. And as chapter 8 closes, the entire battlefield of Kurukshetra begins to feel less like a catastrophe and more like a classroom. A severe, uncompromising, perfect classroom, where the student is Arjuna but also you, also every person who has ever stood at the edge of an impossible choice wondering whether what they do next will define them forever. And the answer Krishna keeps giving in every language, in every chapter, is not about the action but about the consciousness from which the action rises. Chapter 9 opens the way a door opens onto a view you were not expecting. Krishna calls what he is about to share the Rajavidya, the royal knowledge, and the Rajaguyam, the royal secret, and he does not mean royal as in reserved for kings but royal as in sovereign, the highest ordering principle, the knowledge that rules all other knowledge the way a root rules an entire tree. And the first thing Krishna tells Arjuna in this chapter is something that should stop every ambitious person cold. He says that this entire universe, every galaxy and grain of dust, every quarterly report and career crisis, rests within him, yet he does not rest within it, and this distinction is not philosophy for its own sake but the most radical reframe of what power actually is. Krishna uses an image here that is worth sitting with. He says he sustains all beings the way the great wind, moving everywhere through space, rests always in space itself, and what he is pointing to is a mode of being that is fully present, fully active, fully engaged, yet never captured, never consumed, never diminished by what it touches. This is the chapter where Krishna speaks about devotion most directly, and he does something quietly revolutionary. He says that even those who worship other deities are in fact worshipping him, unknowingly, the way every river moving toward different coasts is still moving toward the same ocean. And this is not the claim of a jealous god but the observation of the ultimate ground beneath all seeking. Then Krishna says something that has startled serious practitioners for thousands of years. He says he is equally present in all beings, that he neither favors nor forsakes anyone, and yet those who worship him with devotion are in him and he is in them, and the apparent contradiction resolves only when you understand that proximity to the divine is not a matter of divine preference but of human orientation. The corporate parallel here is exact and unsparing. In any organization, information flows toward those who are aligned with its deepest purpose, not because leadership plays favorites but because alignment creates the conditions for transmission, and Krishna is saying the same thing about the cosmos, that the universe does not withhold itself from you but you withhold yourself from the universe through distraction, through grasping, through the noise of constant self-referential thinking. Krishna then speaks about those who ignore this knowledge while performing all the outer rituals of religion or success. He calls it worship without understanding, and he says it is ultimately fruitless, not because the divine punishes ignorance but because a seed planted in concrete cannot grow regardless of how faithfully you water it, and this is one of the most honest things in the entire Gita. And this is where chapter 9 becomes almost unbearable in its tenderness. Krishna says that whoever offers him a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or even water with sincere devotion, he accepts it, he receives it fully, and what he is describing is not a transaction but a relationship, one where the quality of presence matters infinitely more than the size of the offering. Krishna closes his teaching in this chapter with a verse that has been chanted in temples and whispered in hospitals and written on the walls of cells. He says, "Fix your mind on him, be devoted to him, worship him, bow to him, and you will come to him." And what this means practically is to bring the quality of your deepest attention to whatever you do, to make the ordinary act sacred through the consciousness you carry into it. Chapter 9 ends not with a command but with a promise, and it is the kind of promise that does not require you to believe it in advance but only to test it, that no devotee of the divine, no person who has genuinely turned their attention toward the highest, is ever lost, and as Arjuna absorbs this on the field of Kurukshetra, surrounded by armies and grief, you understand that this promise was never only for him but for anyone standing in any battlefield, internal or external, who is willing to look up from the chaos and ask what this moment is actually asking of them. Chapter 10 opens like a second wind. Krishna has already given Arjuna the architecture of the universe, the science of the soul, the secret of devotion, and yet he pauses, looks at his friend across the noise of two armies, and says, "I will tell you more, because I love you and you are listening." This is not a teacher padding a lecture. This is a master who sees that his student is finally ready for the deepest transmission, and in the corporate world this moment has a name. It is the conversation that happens after the meeting ends, when the senior colleague pulls you aside and says, "Now let me tell you what the textbook never will." Krishna begins chapter 10 with something astonishing. He tells Arjuna that not even the gods, not even the great sages, know his true origin, because he is the source from which both gods and sages themselves arose, and this is not arrogance but a statement about the nature of the infinite. The ocean cannot be fully mapped by any wave inside it. What follows is one of the most extraordinary passages in all of world literature. Krishna begins to list his own divine expressions, his vibhutis, the places in the visible world where his energy concentrates most intensely, and he says, "Among the Adithyas I am Vishnu, among lights I am the radiant sun, among the Maruts I am Marichi, among stars I am the moon." He continues, "Among the Vedas he is the Sama Veda, among the senses he is the mind, among living beings he is consciousness itself, among the Pandavas he is Arjuna," and that last one stops you cold because Krishna is essentially telling his student, in the entire lineage of great warriors, the place where divine energy most perfectly concentrates right now is in you, standing exactly where you stand. The practical teaching embedded in this poetic catalog is one that modern psychology has only recently begun to understand, that when you train your attention to see excellence and beauty as expressions of something deeper, as glimpses of the infinite wearing temporary forms, you stop being dulled by the world and begin to be awakened by it, and your work, your relationships, your challenges all begin to carry a different weight. Arjuna is overwhelmed. He has been listening to Krishna speak for 9 chapters and now he says something deeply human. "You say these things about yourself, but I believe you, and yet I want to know how I should meditate on you, in what forms should I think of you as I move through the world?" And this question is the question of every sincere person who has ever been told that the divine is everywhere and then looked around at a traffic jam and wondered how. Krishna's answer is both humbling and liberating. He says, "There is no end to my divine expressions. What I have listed are only a few examples, but understand this. Wherever you see extraordinary excellence, wherever something strikes you as magnificent, wherever power and beauty and grace concentrate beyond the ordinary, Know that it has arisen from a fragment of my glory, and this is not mysticism but a practical instruction for how to walk through life with open eyes. Chapter 10 closes with one of the most quietly devastating lines in the entire Gita. Krishna says, "But what need do you have for all this detailed knowledge, Arjuna? I exist sustaining this entire universe with a single fragment of myself." And in that line, the scale of what is being described becomes briefly, terrifyingly clear. Every galaxy, every ocean, every human ambition, every moment of grief on this battlefield, held in place by something that has barely turned its attention toward. And as the 10th chapter ends and the 11th begins, Arjuna does something that no strategic advisor, no corporate mentor, no spiritual teacher has ever been asked before or since. He asks Krishna to show him his universal form, to drop the human disguise and reveal what is actually standing beside him on this field. And it is a request born not from doubt but from a readiness that has been building for 10 chapters, the readiness of a person who has finally stopped flinching and is willing to see reality as it actually is. Krishna grants the vision, but not freely, not casually. He tells Arjuna that these eyes of flesh cannot hold what is about to be revealed, and so he gives him Divya Chakshu, divine sight, a gift of perception that goes beyond the 5 senses, because some truths cannot be received by an ordinary mind, only by one that has been prepared, chapter by chapter, question by question, crisis by crisis, for exactly this moment. What Arjuna sees in chapter 11 is not a beautiful deity or a serene cosmic painting. It is everything simultaneously, all of existence collapsed into a single form, thousands of heads, thousands of arms, the sun and moon as eyes, the entire universe displayed in one body, and Arjuna uses the word adbhutam, astonishing, but his voice is already beginning to shake, because there is a difference between wanting to see infinity and actually standing inside it. The vision intensifies and Arjuna watches armies. His own armies, the Kaurava forces, Bhishma, Drona, Karna, every warrior on this field, being drawn into Krishna's mouths like rivers rushing into the ocean, crushed between radiant teeth, and he understands with a cold, absolute clarity that the battle's outcome is not undecided. It has never been undecided. These men are already gone, and he is only being asked whether he will participate in what is already written. This is the moment the Gita stops being a philosophy seminar and becomes something closer to a reckoning, because Arjuna does not feel liberated by what he sees. He feels destroyed by it, trembling, unable to stand, and he cries out to Krishna to please return to his gentle human form, because a human being can only hold so much reality before something in them cracks. Krishna reveals what this vision means for the working world. Not in the abstract, but with surgical precision. He says, Namitta matram bhava, be only an instrument, these warriors are already slain by me, you are simply the means through which the result will be expressed. And for anyone who has ever felt crushed by the weight of a decision whose consequences seem to rest entirely on their shoulders, this is either the most disturbing or the most liberating sentence ever spoken. The 11th chapter closes with Krishna reassuring Arjuna that this universal form is extraordinarily rare. Not even the gods see it easily, not through Vedic study, not through ritual, not through renunciation. And yet here on a battlefield, to a man in the middle of a breakdown, it has been given, which says something profound about where genuine revelation tends to arrive, not in temples of perfect calm, but in the worst moments, when the disguise of normalcy has finally been stripped away. Chapter 12 opens in a completely different register, quieter, warmer, almost conversational, and Arjuna asks a question that has confused spiritual seekers for thousands of years. Who is better, the one who worships the personal form of God with devotion, or the one who meditates on the unmanifest formless absolute? And Krishna's answer is honest in a way that institutional religion rarely is. Both paths lead there, but the formless path is harder, because embodied beings find it genuinely difficult to orient themselves towards something that has no shape, no story, no face. Krishna then does something structurally remarkable. He gives a ladder, a sequence for those who cannot immediately achieve perfect devotion or perfect meditation. He says, if you cannot fix your mind on me, practice. If you cannot practice, perform your actions for my sake. If you cannot do that, at least relinquish the fruits of what you do, and this ladder is not a spiritual consolation prize. It is a recognition that human beings grow in stages, and no stage is shameful, only the refusal to take the next step. The chapter builds toward what many scholars consider the most moving passage in the entire Gita, the description of the ideal devotee, and it is striking what Krishna does not include in that list. Not the most learned, not the most austere, not the most ritually pure, but the one who bears no ill will to any creature, who is the same in pleasure and pain, who forgives, who is content, who does not disturb the world and is not disturbed by it. A portrait that sounds almost impossibly gentle, set against the backdrop of a war. As the 12th chapter closes and the 13th opens, the Gita shifts into its final philosophical arc. The nature of the self, the nature of the world, the relationship between the knower and the known, and Arjuna, who began this conversation unable to lift his bow, is now asking questions that place him among the greatest philosophical inquirers in human history, transformed not by the disappearance of his problems, but by a willingness to keep asking, keep seeing, keep going deeper, one chapter at a time. The 13th chapter opens with one of the most quietly revolutionary questions in the entire Gita. Arjuna asks Krishna to explain the difference between the field and the knower of the field, between what is experienced and who is doing the experiencing, a question so precise it suggests that weeks of conversation have sharpened his mind into something almost surgical in its focus. Krishna answers by drawing a map of existence itself. The body is the field, and the one who knows the body, who watches thought arise and emotion surge and desire pull, is the knower, the eternal witnessing self that no sword can cut and no fire can burn. The same consciousness that Krishna has been pointing toward since the very first chapter when Arjuna collapsed on the floor of his chariot. The 14th chapter then names the three great forces, the gunas, that bind every soul to the wheel of action. Tamas, the heaviness of inertia. Rajas, the restless fire of ambition. And Sattva, the quiet clarity of wisdom. And in any modern office on any given Monday morning, you can feel all three fighting for control of the same human being before the first meeting even begins. The 15th chapter offers perhaps the Gita's most luminous image, the eternal Ashvatha tree, its roots above and its branches below, a world that appears solid but is in fact a reflection, a shadow cast downward from a light that never dims. And Krishna says the one who cuts this tree of illusion with the sword of non-attachment finds the undying place from which there is no return to confusion. The 16th and 17th chapters complete the portrait, distinguishing the divine qualities from the demonic not as a judgment passed on other people but as a mirror held up to the choices we make every single day, whether we move through life with honesty and fearlessness and compassion, or whether we move through it with arrogance, cruelty, and an appetite that grows larger the more it is fed. And then the 18th chapter arrives, the great conclusion, and Krishna asks Arjuna to abandon even the idea of abandoning, to surrender not his strength but his smallness, to act with full force and full love and full surrender to something larger than the outcome, and Arjuna, who once could not lift his bow, rises. And in that rising, across 18 chapters and countless centuries, so does every one of us who has ever sat in our own Kurukshetra, trembling and uncertain, and dared to keep listening, stay devoted, stay patient, and keep turning inward, because the answers are always within you.